We would invite all who would care to join us in standing of the recitation of the Lord's Prayer, followed by a moment of silence. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
it is now 7 o'clock. Shelby City Council meeting is called to order. Please remain standing and join us for our Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Be seated, please. Roll call, please.
Mr. Robb.
Here.
Mr. Roberts. Here. Mr. Gates.
Here.
Mr. Martin.
Here.
Mr. McLaughlin. Here.
I will now entertain a motion to dispense with the reading of the journal from November the 1st, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Roberts and a second by Mr. Martin for the dispensing of the reading of the journal from November 1st, 2021. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Gates.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Robb.
Yay.
That motion passes. Now come to the time for public comment. If anyone has any public comment they would like to make before council, ask you to come to the podium and state your name and address and make your comment to council. Hearing none, we'll move forward then to reports from standing and special committees. Finance and Personnel Committee, Councilman Gates.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I begin my report, I'd like to introduce a guest. My brother-in-law, Mr. Fred Smith, is here visiting from Rock Hill, South Carolina. Yesterday at one point I said, Fred, would you like to come to City Council? He jumped at the, he jumped at the opportunity to be here and listen to government at work. So perhaps that should be a gentle lesson to our constituents. Well, let's take a look at the financial report. We're going to turn to the back page as we've been doing the past few months and look at city income tax collections. Again, another good month, the month of October. We can see that we brought in $387,000. Looking at the 5 years that we have displayed there, that is significantly greater than the next month, which was $349,000. One thing that impacts October is people who did not pay their income taxes earlier in the year who got an extension. Those come due on October 15th. So that is perhaps some explanation. If we look up at the top graph, we can see that income tax has brought in so far this year, the end of October, $4.2 million, 24% above the 3-year average. The estimate for income tax collections this year was $3,732,000, so we are significantly above what the estimate was. And the estimate for this year was going to be a drop of 7% over the previous year. So that's the situation. Another thing that's helping with city income tax is that the clerks are being much more diligent, like they've never been, in preparing, going out finding scofflaws and turning those over to the law director for citation into municipal court. the number that the finance director mentioned, that there were 50 complaints. I'm not sure if that's so far this year or if that's what are currently pending in municipal court.
And that's what I sent last week.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
just last week, an additional 50 complaints. So the clerks are doing their job. Obviously, the law director is doing his job. It's the law. First of all, we have mandatory filing, so even if people don't owe anything to the city, they are required to file. So, and it's better to take care of those because, there are court costs that are levied, that people have to pay above and beyond what they might owe for income tax. So, with that, let's go to the second page, and at the bottom is where we can see the breakdown in individuals, business, and withholding. We know we have for business, it says $893,000 brought in, but we know we had that extraordinary declaration for the month of September, so that does skew that quite a bit. But individual taxes are up, pushing 10% over the 3-year average. Withholding is up a little over 5% compared to the 3-year average. So, just good numbers all around for the city income tax. Well, let's go to the front page. We'll look at the general fund. Again, it's in good shape, but that's, again, to some extent, some of the transfers that we had in September. 1.4 in cash. Take out the encumbrances. We have $1.3 million in the general fund. If we go down to Fund 220, the income tax fund, normally what has happened is we reduce that down to $50,000. We're going to start to retain some monies there, not do those transfers into the general fund capital improvements, somewhat as a buffer if we need it in case we do have an extraordinary refund. The worst thing we want to have happen is that the general fund, for example, would have to write a check to the income tax fund, so then the income tax fund can refund it. That's something that's never happened before. It was the general fund had to return fund monies to income tax. We don't want that to happen. Health and Park are in good shape. Go down to 283, the local coronavirus fund, and the finance director is preparing to transfer those monies so that they can be used for police wages. We know that that is a safe and an approved expenditure for those local coronavirus monies. They have to be expended down to zero by the end of next month. The sewer fund is looking better. $208,000 in cash, $154,000 free and clear. Likewise, the water fund, $406,000 in cash, $273,000 free and clear. The electric fund is down, but we know why it's down. We've been intentional in reducing rates. Hospitalization, as of the end of October, was looking good, but the Deputy Finance Director mentioned that there was a large bill that has come due since then, so that will be reduced, but we still think that, or we anticipate that hospitalization fund is going to have a good balance into the first year so that we can look at the possibility of waiving a month's premiums into that. Savings all around for the city. If you're looking for a quick and dirty comparison, 10 months constitutes 83% of the year. Last line at the bottom, we brought in 82% of the anticipated income and expended 63% of the anticipated expenditures. So it's a good quick and dirty for for all of the funds combined. Again, looking at the next page, here's where we can see the comparison with the total budget. Revenues exceed expenditures by a little over $1 million. The general fund, again, revenues exceed expenditures this year, $116,000. Wages in the general fund are up 6%. Bless you. But that's overtime and some payouts, impact that, as also the just the across the board wage increases there. Looking at the third page, down at the bottom we can see where the more the income tax, the transfers to the various funds. You can see the refunds for this year, just about $71,000. It was mentioned we had a refund for $17,000, another one for $7,000. Those are pretty big. Those are much bigger than any tax refund I get. But you can get an idea why we're want to make sure that we've got some monies still in the income tax fund that we can deal with some anticipated refunds. The next page is the cash investment and reconciliation statement. As of the end of October, we had in the city treasury $15,793,036.27 in Civista, PNC, Park National, and U.S. Bank. Next page, the Sutter Roush Fund is doing well. I've already talked about that last page with income tax. Some personnel matters. Mary reported that contract negotiations are moving along, and of course that'll be a topic for our executive session at the end. The fire department and the firefighters union are looking at an MOU regarding training. So we'll be looking for that at some point. We've had 2 new hires, a new police officer, a new firefighter. There is a vacancy in the fire department as a result of a resignation. We had a resignation in the line department, and for the position of administrative assistant in the health department, 7 applications. Mary, you had mentioned those are going to be winnowed down to the top 3 that would then be interviewed. I'm not sure if you had mentioned, when you anticipate a hiring date.
Let's do the first part of next month.
Okay.
I think the first couple of weeks, hopefully. About middle of December, probably.
Okay, good. Something else we looked at has to do with it's Ohio Revised Code 2113.04, payment of wages of deceased employee without administration. This is in the probate law, and I had come across a sample ordinance that made reference to this section of Revised Code, and what I did was just send both the Revised Code section and the sample ordinance off to the law director for his comment. Besides, criminal law, municipal law, he also knows about probate, so we'll let the resident expert talk about that. A few days after our last council meeting, we received electronically the draft of the state audit and some attachments. Of course, those are not to be released, but by the state auditor himself. But we were solicited for whether or not we want a post-audit conference. We talked about this at the Finance Committee. We see no reason to have a post-audit conference, but nonetheless there's a form here that needs to be returned to the state auditor, informing them that we don't want to have a state post-audit conference. I'll deal with that in just a moment, because right now what I want to do is to make a motion, unless anyone has any questions about the finance report.
Are there any comments or questions?
Mayor, I move that the combined financial statement and the cash investment reconciliation statement be received, placed on file, and posted to the city's website.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. Martin that the combined financial statement and the cash investment reconciliation statement, both dated 10/31/21, be received, placed on file, and posted to the city website. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Gates.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Rob.
Yay.
That motion passes.
Mayor, to return to the request for post-hoc conference, the clerk did give everyone a copy of the letter from the state auditor. We have reviewed the draft audit report and management letter. We do not wish to have a formal exit conference to discuss these. So at this point, I will move that the city decline having a formal exit conference on the 2020 audit.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. Martin that the city decline a formal exit conference on the 2020 audit. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Gates.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Rob.
Yay.
That motion passes.
Mayor, I would move that Mr. McLaughlin, as Vice President Council, be directed to sign this letter on council's behalf.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. Martin that Councilman McLaughlin be directed to sign the letter on council's behalf. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Gates.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Rob.
Yay.
That motion passes.
Mayor, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilman Gates, for your report. We'll move forward then to Utilities and Streets Committee. Councilman Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. Utilities and Streets Committee met November 10th, 2021. I met in a virtual capacity, but I'm prepared to give the report. The 2021 street paving project is complete. Project did have a change order. Change order is for $31,301.67. The adjusted total project amount is just over $447,000. We are organizing the street paving list for the 2022 planning year. Planning to present the paving project to council in Q1. We want to put the bid project early, hoping to receive better bids, early posting. Collection of funds for the project typically available in July. Paving start date early to make Q3. The funding source being Fund 353, streets, alleys, and catch basins, collections from the income tax, street levy, and the estimated project cost for the 2022 street paving project will be around $450,000. That's also the anticipated annual collection for the street levy. Convenient all the way around. Washington Street resurfacing. We researched the process to resurface the top 2 inches of the concrete street with a blend of different materials to allow for an asphalt top coat. A different resurfacing process due to the street material being concrete. There are 5 different processes that utilize the 3 or 4 different contractors. So step 1 is to mill the concrete down 2 inches, mill the expansion joints down another 1 to 2 inches. Durapatch the joints, tar and chip the entire surface with a 1/2 inch layer that bonds the entire street, and then 1.5 inch of asphalt top coat. That project will take a lot of coordination to organize contractors. That estimated project cost is a little less than $50,000. Present legislation to allow the expenditure. Funding source will be 200 streets based off of collections from the gas tax. Lead service line project update. We are in the final stages before receiving the principal forgiveness loan. It's a loan that does not need to be repaid for the Main Street lead service line replacement project. That loan amount is for just over $288,000. That was sought to replace 41 lead service lines on Main Street. And we've seen those maps before. We did receive public notice for the on November 5th for the limited environmental review and finding of no significant impact. That notice is posted on the city website and under the announcement news. November 8th, we received the final documents to be executed and returned to the Ohio EPA. On the 9th, the executed documents were returned, and the week of November 22nd, which is next week, we're expected to hear back from the Ohio EPA on the loan award. Project funds will be held in a water supply revolving loan account. Shelby will draw the funds from the account when needed during the project timeline. Phase 2 of the lead service line locations. We are planning phase 2 for the lead service line replacements. Phase 2 will be identifying the exact location of the lead service lines throughout the community. The Ohio EPA has funding available for those such service line replacements, but it requires knowing exactly where those lead lines are located. Service Department has a lead service line map, but it's more generalized to specific areas. And so we need to identify the exact physical location of those lead service lines. And RCAP has a team that works with rural communities to help identify those. And that initial contact has been made to RCAP asking for their assistance. And that stands for Rural Community Assistance Program. Sorry for using an acronym without explaining that first, but there you go. All right, we had I want to say a lengthy presentation, but we had a significant presentation on ornamental or white way lamp posts, along with the historical documentation. So I'm not going to go through all the historical part of this. It's very good reading though. Please, you guys all got the PowerPoint in your email, so please take a look at that. But essentially, what comes down to is that the ornamental lights on the boulevard, in the boulevard district, I guess we'd call it, are nearing their life expectancy. And so we are going to have some decisions to make on how to handle those. The distribution of those is there are 30 on Grand Boulevard still, 2 on Wentz Avenue, 2 on Wilson Avenue. So I'm going to go over the options briefly without the historical context. So option 1, maintain the current lamppost. Lampposts are already 96 years old, and they're not energy efficient, and they're also high maintenance. So it just doesn't seem like a really good bet on that, but that is an option. Option 2 is replace the existing lamppost with a new LED lamppost. New lampposts with the LED light fixtures are very energy efficient. We can get similar styles to the current lamppost design. Those are available. And the estimated costs for 28 new lampposts installed in the, and this goes into how we install them, so bear with me. So the estimated cost for the 28 new lampposts, if we install them in the median, is roughly around $50,000 to $75,000. If we install them in the tree lawn where they're currently at, that's around $100,000 to $150,000. And the reason for that has to do with running the electric. The current electric for all of those runs from the back of all the houses all the way to the front to the tree lawn. Now, in discussion, we talked about, well, we could run it across the street into the tree lawn from the median where the power is at. That would be a savings. So we obviously don't have an estimate for that. The other part of this, of course, is who pays. So there are different thoughts on this. Obviously, whether the city pays, the property owner pays, a mix. It's always been historically a mix, depending on which era it was, 2%, 35%. But that's going to be a question that we're going to have to answer, and there are different thoughts on that. As far as, are they so historical that they are a mainstay of the community, so that we want to preserve them as a community? Or do we just, do we go by what it would cost for us to put up normal streetlights and add that cost to there? So there's a lot of cost considerations there. But we are, well, in option 3, remove the lampposts or replace with standard streetlights. I'll be perfectly upfront. I called this the over my dead body option in the in the committee meeting, just because I think that it would create a lot of more issues than it actually solves, having streetlights in the median over the boulevard for that. Not the chief of which is that we don't own the median, it's the parks. They have to do stuff there. But that quick loose estimate, I'll be fair, it is around $15,000 to $25,000. So it is obviously the cheaper option, but in this councilman's estimation, not a good one. There was also a nice map of where all the current lights are, etc. All right, so that's that. For our December meeting, we are going to follow up on the electric fund balance. We obviously are still discussing what does the actual electric fund balance need to look. We're still populating the cost for our electric distribution system for that insurance component that we talked about the last time. And then also we're going to be talking about electric transmission cost increase, solar and battery expansion to curtail that transmission costs, and discussing new speed limit signs and school crosswalk signals. So consider that a tease for the December meeting. With that, Mayor, that is my report.
All right. Councilman Martin, are there any comments or questions for Councilman Martin in regard to his report? Hearing none, we'll move forward then to Safety Committee. Councilman Roberts.
Thank you, sir. Safety Committee met on November 3rd, dominated by fire news. Chief Thompson reported that on December 4th, there will be a civil service written test for firefighters. To qualify for the test, applicants will need to possess their Ohio Volunteer Firefighter Card and an EMT Basic Card. This test will be given to recruit applicants to fill one open position at the Shelby Fire, and to keep a list for future vacant positions. Applications for the test can be picked up at City Hall or are available on the city's website. The clocks were to be set back on November 7th, and although that's passed, still going to remind everyone that on those days when we move our clocks, we need to change the batteries in our smoke detectors and CO2 detectors, and if those detectors are 10 years or older, then they need to be replaced. There's a shelf life for those, and safety first, batteries are cheap, and realistically the detectors aren't that expensive, so it's a lot cheaper than anything else could cost you for your house department now. See, the health department would like to thank everybody that voted for the passage of the levy, and there's also, so we discussed COVID data, but I will let the mayor talk about that if he has in his report. It seems like the numbers from our safety committee are always different by the time I come here to give the report. So anyway, that's my report.
Thank you, Councilman Roberts. Are there any comments or questions for Mr. Roberts in regard to his report? Mr. Rob.
Yeah, don't know why, but I seem to be under the impression that the requirement for a firefighter new hire was paramedic and not EMT based.
That is the truth. We are going to, with this, just to take the test, they have to have the volunteer firefighter's card, and they also have to have the basic EMT card. We haven't talked a lot about it yet, but there will be training that may be paid for by the city or by the fire department after someone gets hired.
Yeah, Councilman.
Wouldn't it make more sense to hire somebody that's already had the training as opposed to training them at the city's expense? The paramedic school is a long, drawn-out process, and not so much the expense of the school that I'm concerned about, it's the expense, the personnel expense, because not only do you need to cover for the person that is going to school, but you also have to pay them to attend. So to me, it just makes more sense, you know, to look at people that already have the training as opposed to training them once you hire them.
Mr. Roberts.
If I may, I don't have those answers, and maybe Chief Thompson may have more information.
We still have lateral transfer in place for people that are already 240 and paramedic. We have 0 applicants, and that with meeting the criteria. We have an opening. A lot of cities around us are, for lack of better terms, lowering the entrance to draw in more people, more applicants. Will it be a cost? Yes. What we're looking to do, if we have to send them to 240, it depends. You know, they can come in as with a 240 but a basic EMT. They can come in as a paramedic but a volunteer firefighter. So there's a lot of scenarios. Traditionally, if they need professional firefighter, in the past we've just sent them at 7 weeks. That's just considered their job, done it for years. Paramedic, we're looking on sending them on their day off. Since we work 1 off 2, be on their off days. Still debate on what we would do is we would pay for the class and books, and we're still kind of discussing, and I actually have a meeting tomorrow on that about compensation. So we're just trying to attract as many applicants as we can to pick from to get a good applicant in. So we're having to broaden our scope, I guess. And that's the whole purpose of it. The lateral transfer still exists. If we get a lateral transfer in and they're a good fit, they already have the training, great. That's the best scenario. But we're just not getting the applicants. And the other fire departments are saying the same thing. This is very similar to what Mansfield's doing right now. I had a discussion with Chief Strickland today about that. Cyrus, I know, is bringing in people that aren't 240 medic and they're training them. I believe Young is doing the same thing. So, just got to widen our net that we're throwing to try to get applicants in.
Mr. Rob.
Well, I think your expectation that you're going to send them on their days off is unrealistic, number one. Number two, I'm no stranger to this process, and I've seen it happen time and time again. You bring a person in, you give them the training, and they find a better position in the next city, they're going to take it. So basically what we end up doing is we end up training people for somebody else's department, and that's not something I want to see.
Well, that is also why part of this that we are talking about a commitment. They have 4 years with the COVID issues that are going on, about allowing 4 years to gain 240 medic or sooner if they get it completed sooner, and then a commitment afterwards of owing us X amount of time, so that if we train you, probably go on like a sliding scale. 1 year you're paying us back 100%, 2 years 75%, 3 years just goes down by 25% each time on what you reimburse the city for training. So it's an incentive for them. We're getting you an incentive. Hey, we're going to train you. You owe us some time. So we've actually worked that in.
I think you and I both know that won't work.
I think it will work. And
Mr. Gates?
Mayor, what does the current job description require?
It is paramedic. Or
the current job description is paramedic 240. It's been reworked. It's in its final stages of being reworked. We have reworked that. We're finalizing that, where it'll basically be a job description for people who come in as a lateral, so they'd be 240 medic, and then if they came in taking the test, meeting at least the minimum criteria.
Mr. Gates?
Mayor, I don't need to tell you what your authority is, but you have the authority as safety director to write, approve job descriptions for police, fire, and health departments. I'd like to see a copy of the current one as it exists this evening. And if there's a draft, and evidently there is a draft of revision, I'd like to see that. I think my colleagues would like to see that as well. So if we could have those via email very soon.
I can, if it's okay, can I get, tomorrow, it's on my computer, I can
Sure.
email it to
Sure,
you.
that's
no problem.
fine.
I actually have, I have highlighted on what was the draft, and then anything that's highlighted is the proposed change. And then also with the input of all the captains, there's a second highlight color that is their suggestions that we incorporated into it also. So it's been through myself, all three captains. This wasn't just a one person.
And our HR department and.
Yes, HR, the mayor.
Ms. Amber thinks.
Eight,
Human resources,
we don't have a human resources.
well, I'm sure I shouldn't say department. The one who does our HR work and all of our, most of our payroll.
Okay,
And
We have a
access
payroll
to
department,
on
I can see
payroll,
that,
yes, yes, yeah.
but,
I just moved her into a new office and,
so, but, you know, again, and you know this, Mayor, but for the record, in your capacity as safety director and service director, you are the human resources officer for the city. And I'll piggyback again. You have the authority to write job descriptions, not the five of us here at City Council. Obviously, we can add our input, but ultimately, those are your decisions.
Are there any other comments or questions in regard to Mr. Roberts' report? Thank you, Chief. All right, we'll move forward then to reports of city officials. I know we have a full agenda tonight, so I really don't have any report, other than the fact that I asked Mr. Hansman if he might say just give us a brief description of the outage we had, and maybe a little bit more information than we had last Friday. It doesn't have to be anything a deep dive, but some folks are wondering, what happened, and so could you maybe address that, just a few
Thanks, Mayor.
sentences?
Approximately 12:37 a.m. on Friday morning, a capacitor failed at the AEP Howard substation. That resulted in a citywide outage across the city. So approximately 11 hours later, the power was restored. So it took some time for AEP to come in, evaluate the situation. The technician was able to identify the issue, was able to get the new capacitor installed and energize the system back up. So it was a capacitor at the AEP Howard substation that caused the failure.
There you have it. Thank you, sir.
Well,
So I didn't have another report other than the fact that this had been taking care of typical mayoral duties in the last couple of weeks. I do have candidate to be considered to the Health Department Advisory Board. Mr. Martin.
Before we get into that, Mayor, if I can ask a question for you.
Sure.
So, just piggybacking off of this, so obviously this wasn't something that was internal to our own system. We know that we have a pretty well-maintained system. We've bragged on that ad nauseum. So, but the issue that I saw though is that this can be a potential thing that happens. What kind of planning do we have in place? So it was very fortunate for us, it was not a super cold day, right? But if this had happened and it had been negative temperatures, you know, we have, whether it be not necessarily the nursing homes, but care facilities, people needing heat, etc. It would be nice to have a plan in place for warming centers, things of that nature, that we can put into place when something like this happens. Obviously, we didn't plan for this because it's never been an issue. I think our longest outage before this has been, several hours. Nothing this significant. So, but if this were to happen in the middle of the winter, I think it would be good to have a plan in place, because there are some churches that are willing to do warming centers, etc. They're on the outskirts of our power grid that did have power that morning, and we were able to reach out to them and get that information put out. But it'd be nice to have basically a pre-plan in place. The last thing we want is people to jump in their cars in their garage and decide to warm themselves. Those things don't end well, and we know those kind of things occur during these kind of events. So just for planning purposes, it would be good to incorporate that in our emergency plans.
And thank you for that. We had a debriefing this morning at our superintendent's meeting, and we listed several items, and that was one of them too. This has given us an opportunity to take a look at our generating resources within town, how we can best utilize them, and we learned some things. We actually did some testing under realistic conditions. So Mr. Ensman has, in fact, it was last month or two, we were getting together some of the facts and figures with electrical engineers to find ways that we can better use our generational resources strategically in the city. So you're right on, we're thinking the same. Whenever you have a situation like this, the debriefing time should set in motion the thought processes of what if this happens again. So we're ready. Thank you. Are there any other questions for me before we get to the confirmation that I have before you? Right. I have on the table a motion to confirm the appointment of Linda Klein to the Health Department Advisory Board to fill an unexpired term.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Robb and a second by Mr. McLaughlin to confirm the appointment of Linda Klein to the Health Department Advisory Board to fill an unexpired term. The name was suggested by Dr. Chow himself, who has worked with Ms. Klein at the hospital in her capacity, as was described on her application there. Are there any further comments, discussion? Mr. Gates.
When does the term expire?
I believe it's at the end of 2022. This is Ms. Serrano. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Gates?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yay.
Mr. Robb?
Yay.
The motion to confirm passes. Thank you. Moving forward then to the report from Mr. Brian Crone, Director of Finance.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Gates, once again, did a wonderful job going over all the financials and stated most everything that I need to talk about already, so I won't take too much time. I do just want to remind everybody that we are very quickly approaching the end of the year. So the last day for new purchase orders will be December 15th. So if anybody has anything that they need to order, we'd like to get the ball rolling by then. And also, the departments could go through their open POs and we'll get those closed to clean up the year-end books. And we'll plan on doing inventory counts due on December 30th. And also, if anybody has any time, I'd like to start getting the ball rolling on appropriations, because that is quite the quite the project, and the sooner the better. So if the department heads could start working on those, I would be grateful. That serves my report.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Crum. Are there any comments or questions for Mr. Crum in regard to his report? All right, hearing none, we'll move forward to Mr. Eister, who is not able to be with us this evening. We'll move forward then to Mr. Joe Getz, project coordinator.
Thank you, Mayor. Mostly right now is working with our contractors for the lead service line and the downtown streetscape. There's submittals, working with our consulting engineer to get those back to them, get stuff ordered. That's been the industry-wide problem of getting materials and time, so we're trying to stay on top of that. We're also working with a consultant for the new park downtown to get that in line, and hopefully the council will put out the bids at some point and get that rolling for next year. So that's all I have there.
Mr. Geis, are any comments or questions for Mr. Geis in regard to his report? Hearing none, we'll move forward to new business. Any new business to be brought before council this evening? Mr. Crum.
We did receive today a notice of appeal from Mr. Gregory Mellick regarding some, he has a historic property downtown. He went through the Historic Preservation Commission regarding replacing some damaged parapet items, and they aren't quite in line with what we have set up in the ordinance, and so he has done an appeal to council. And correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, that we have 30 days to act on this.
That's correct. And we also included the actual letter that was sent to the property owner from the Historic Preservation Commission, and that section of the ordinance is in there also for council's use.
This is a first of its kind. So, for an ordinance, I trust council will then be able to walk through those steps. As outlined in the ordinance. Mr. Martin.
So my understanding, this is just for the application for a certificate of appropriateness, correct? So.
So I think we read the word yes, Mr. Crum.
Yeah, so if I'm correct, we can put this on next agenda after they've had a chance to review it if we want.
I think that would be the appropriate thing to do. Cover the unfinished business at that point. All right, so do we have the information, gentlemen? Is there any other new business? All right, now moving forward to unfinished business. Nothing to report on the future use of the Main Street Fire Station at this point. And under the ward boundaries from the 2020 census, we have not yet received those details on that, Mr. Geis.
I talked to the representative from regional planning today. He's hoping to give me something tomorrow, so I'm hoping that's what we need. And then I'll surely send that on to council, so you guys can schedule your meeting to discuss that.
All right, thank you. Is there any other unfinished business you've ever brought before council? Hearing none, we'll move forward to legislation.
Ordinance number 29, 2021, amending section 238.01, establishment, membership of chapter 238, police department of the codified ordinances of the city of Shelby.
Move for second reading.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and I move the second by Mr. Roberts for the second reading of ordinance number 29, 2021. Discussion? Mr. Gates.
Mayor, in the ordinance itself, where it's section 1, it says that section 238.01.04 of the codified, I ask unanimous consent that the .04 be deleted.
For Mr. Gates, asking by unanimous consent that section 1 be amended by deleting the number 238.01, deleting the .04. Are there any objections? Hearing none, that will be amended as so stated. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Gates.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Rob.
Yay.
Ordinance number 29, 2021 passes.
Ordinance number 30, 2021, enacting section 234.12, property tax valuations of chapter 234, Director of Finance and Public Record of the codified ordinances of the city of Shelby.
Move for second reading.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. Martin for the second reading of ordinance number 30, 2021. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Gates.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Rob.
Yay.
Ordinance number 30, 2021 passes.
Ordinance number 32, 2021, establishing a zoning classification for property annexed to the city of Shelby, Schuler Moore annexation.
Move for first reading.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. Roberts for the first reading of ordinance number 32, 2021. Discussion? Mr. Gates.
Mayor, this is a follow-up to the action and recommendation of the Planning Commission. If property is annexed into the city and we do not establish zoning for it, we did not in this particular case, Jackson Township zoning would still apply to this property within the city. Totally objectionable situation.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Gates.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Rob.
Yay.
Ordinance number 32, 2021 passes.
Ordinance number 33, 2021, enacting section 260.28, office hours of chapter 260, employees generally of the codified ordinances of the city of Shelby.
Move for first reading.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. Martin for the first reading of ordinance number 33, 2021. Discussion. Mr. Gates.
Mayor, I've spent parts of the last 2 weeks looking high and low through Title VII of the revised code as to who establishes the hours for City Hall to be open. I found nothing in there. The closest that I could find was a provision that says that the Director of Public Service is responsible for the buildings. But again, nothing that says who sets the hours. I had done some research in some other cities, found that the city of Greenville, the city of Macedonia, and the city of Salem have ordinances on the book where obviously City Council has established those hours. So again, we had had a situation that had existed for decades where City Hall was open from 8 in the morning till 5 in the evening. And that first your predecessor and then you reduced those hours. I, again, could not find any statutory authority for those actions. The end result, of course, is that we provide a lesser level of service to the people of the city when we reduce the hours. This ordinance, recognizes, what the situation is now. It does not restore those hours, but puts them in the statute so that, again, as it says in one of the whereases, so that the public can know with confidence when it may transact business at these locations. This includes both City Hall and the Municipal Utilities Office.
Mr. Rob?
Mr. Gates, alluded to the fact that the Director of Public Service sets those hours. That's an administrative function. I'd like to see that stay an administrative function. I think this
Point
ordinance...
of order. Mr. Roberts misstated what I said. I did not say that the Director of Public Service set the hours. I said the Director of Public Service was responsible for the buildings, meaning the buildings themselves, not the hours that the buildings are open.
Mr. Rob?
Well, I would argue that if he's responsible for the buildings, he's responsible for the hours of business, and that would be an administrative function. And I apologize to Mr. Gates if he thinks that I was trying to put words in his mouth or anything, but that's not what I was trying to do. I don't feel that this ordinance is necessary. I feel that as Chief Executive Officer of the city, it should remain the mayor's responsibility to set hours of business and hours of employees under him. So I won't support this ordinance.
Mr. Gates?
Mayor, I'll accept Mr. Robb's apology that he did not intend to put words in my mouth, but in fact, that's what he was doing.
Mr. Martin?
I think what we have before us is a fundamental question about where duties for this responsibility lie. This is a first reading, and so I plan to support this on first reading simply to give more time to that consideration. I think that at times it is wholly appropriate for the legislative body to wrest control over certain items dealing with the city where we feel the public, through our representation, has an outlet to get those services and those needs. We certainly have oversight over all that. Administrative functions or not, we still have oversight. The question here is whether we need to rest that oversight and give it a little bit more teeth. I think that is a worthy question to be considered. And frankly, I don't know where I fall on that. And I think that a little more time for deliberation by council on that is needed and acceptable. So I'm going to vote for the first reading to kind of research what other communities have done to that regard. Just because, I'll say one other thing. Just because something is an administrative function within the purview of the executive branch does not mean that the legislative body has ever given up its jurisdiction on those matters. At any time, any administrative function carried on by the executive of this city or the executive branch anywhere else can be reined in and wrested control from by the legislative branch. That's just the facts of the balances of power and separation of powers that we have. And so I don't accept the argument just because it's an administrative function, it automatically is something that should escape our purview. I do feel that the hours that the city government is open is an important function, a main function of the government's existence at our local level. I question whether closing at 4 p.m. is prudent, personally. There are a lot of people that work. There are a lot of people that work till 5 o'clock. When are they supposed to conduct city business? They're supposed to take time off out of their schedule. I don't think that government should have quote-unquote banking hours. I think that they should have hours that reflect the community that they serve. And I would be saying that if the BMV was constantly closed at times that were inconvenient, but they're not. They're open on Saturdays, and they're open at additional hours to where if you need a driver's license and you work 8 to 5, you don't have to take a day off to actually go get a driver's license. We have to look at the community we serve and understand that we actually serve them. They're not just a rotating piggy bank to draw money from, to do what we need to do, what we see fit. So I question whether 4 o'clock is prudent in the first place. And so that's something I'm going to explore over the next few weeks as well, to see if we should keep 8 to 4. So there are two questions for me fundamentally before us. Should we wrest control from the executive to establish this and have it be within the legislative purview? And if we do decide to be in legislative purview, what are those acceptable hours to provide the best quality service to our constituents? Those are extremely important questions, I feel, and worthy of at least a first reading. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Roberts.
When I first heard about this, had discussion about this ordinance coming up, I was under the impression that, and not by anybody's putting that impression, but just in my mind that it was that people left and it was a freebie and the doors were locked and that was the end of it. And I've since found out that that's not the case. Everybody that left was on. Everybody that was office staff had left using vacation time, and I'm glad to know that it wasn't just everybody just go home and it was a freebie. I also understand that we can probably count on a couple fingers how many times this has happened over the years, as far as this being closed up early like that without any warning. So I just want to make sure that I completely agree with the councilman to my right that we definitely need to establish some kind of hours. What those hours are, I don't know, but I also in some capacity think that are we doing something just in order to do something? Do we have it hasn't happened that very often, and I don't know where you go if everybody's on vacation. What do we do? Who stays? I understand that there were people in the building that day, so and although they were closed, it wasn't like everybody just left and rolled the rug. So
I'm going to hand the authority of the chair to Councilman McLaughlin just for a couple of moments to enter into discussion. So Councilman McLaughlin, may I speak? I felt like Councilman Martin, I've always, in my years as a councilman, and I would say the hundreds of people legislation that came before me, I always felt that legislation deserved a first reading. I always felt, I think one time in all those years that I voted no on a first reading. I believe this ordinance should have a first reading. And I think it gives time for homework in between. We just got this Friday. Gives you some time to ask some questions, come down to City Hall, ask some questions. Again, like Mr. Gates has said, see what other communities are doing, what other public entities, what are the office hours in Richland County, get some more information like that, listen to constituents. And there are a number of things to be considered here, and I'm not going to get into those, but I am a promoter of giving legislation a first reading if at all possible. So that's just kind of my 2 cents worth. I have other things I might say the next time to just give some thoughts for consideration. But I would be on the side of giving this a first reading if I were a councilman. May I have my chair back?
You may, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Gates?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yay.
Mr. Rob?
Nay.
Ordinance number 33, 2021 passes. This first reading.
Resolution number 69, 2021, authorizing the mayor as Director of Public Safety to participate in the state cooperative purchasing plan for the purchase of E.F. Johnson mobile and portable radios.
Move the resolution be taken up and passed.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. Roberts for the passage of resolution number 69, 2021. Discussion. Mr. Gates.
Mayor, my colleagues will recall that a month or so ago, we put the funding in place for purchasing these marked radios. We were very fortunate that they were all on the state cooperative purchasing plan, so we don't have to bid them since the state has already done that. But my assumption is that Vassar Communications, when shown what the state prices were, said, sure, we can provide those locally. So this will be a very good improvement for the safety of our community when these radios are purchased and in operation.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Gates?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yay.
Mr. Rob?
Yay.
Resolution number 69, 2021 passes.
Resolution number 70, 2021, authorizing the mayor as Director of Public Service to enter into contract change order with the Co-Sing Construction Company, Inc. for the 2021 paving project in the amount of $31,301.72 as an increase and declaring an emergency.
Move resolution be taken up and passed.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Roberts and a second by Mr. Martin for the passage of resolution 70, 2021. Discussion. Mr. Martin.
Mayor, as my understanding, this is a change order for the paving project because basically it was a failure of the base. Mr. Geis can touch on that, I'm sure, but the base was not going to support the project and was failing in parts, so we had to redo that. So I'm sure Mr. Geis can.
Thank you. Mr. Geis.
We did last fall have some core samples done in a lot of the areas, and it all came back good. I think we probably, looks like we missed a couple of codes, or we could have done something different to begin with. But anyhow, we had our consultant out there. Once the asphalt was taken off, he thought everything was good to go. But when we put the asphalt back on, everything just rolled up. So this was, and also they had a road where they had a bad mix for one certain road, so they came back and built off the whole road, put it all down and back new. So that probably saved us a little bit of money for them bringing the machines in for that. But that was the most of the, if it wasn't for that, we'd probably be right about, we would be just about even between our additions and subtractions. So.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Gates?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yay.
Mr. Rob?
Yay.
Resolution number 70, 2021 passes. Come now to miscellaneous business. And miscellaneous business is brought before council. Mr. Gates.
Mayor, I move the council go into executive session for the following three purposes. Number one, preparing for, conducting, or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment. Number two, matters required to be kept confidential by federal law or regulations or state statutes. And number 3, to consider the promotion, the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official, or the investigation of charges or complaints against a public employee, official, licensee, or regulated individual, unless the public employee, official, licensee, or regulated individual request a public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. Roberts to go into executive session for the purposes so read. Discussion? Mr. Gates?
Mayor, should this motion pass, I would ask that you, the finance director, the police chief, and the utilities director, as may be appropriate, accompany council into executive session.
Fire chief.
I'm fire chief, my apologies.
Okay. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Gates?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin? Mr. Rob?
Yay.
Council goes into executive session at 8:09.
Really?
Cheers.